Welcome everyone. My name is Sarah Ray. I'm from the Bloomfield Public Library. Thank you for joining us tonight. We are going to start with me sharing my screen. Just bring up the correct screen here. Go.
I like this part right here. Come on. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the on. Till victory is won. Now we add a little something to it. Just encourage you. We're gonna take it to church right now. Let's go. We'll keep marching right until the victory is won. To all my brothers out there. Hold your head up, brother, till the victory is won. To all my sisters in the struggle. Keep believing, sister, till the victory is won. Till that day. Till that day comes. Hey. Let us march on. To victory. Till victory is won. Is won.
Okay, now I'm going to turn this over to Khalid.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your virtual attendance tonight. I just want to start off. My name is Khalid Williams, and I'm a representative of Doll's House Foundation Incorporated. Our house is set upon a foundation of love, and it was built to create a self-sustaining community of individuals who believe in giving freely, expressing needs openly, and accepting all, whether they may be ready to do a good deed or are feeling low and in a place of need. One of the pillars of our philosophy is education. We consider that the world is a classroom and the most comprehensive degree program is our daily experiences. Our footsteps teach a lesson, whether we are jumping for joy or running for our lives. Our town's history, I'm a Bloomfield native, proudly, is inextricably linked with agriculture. Anyone who's been here for any number of years can recall the silos, the tobacco fields, and in my opinion, most importantly, that grape nut ice cream from A.C. Peterson Farms. And if you remember A.C. Peterson Farms, used to do a program for ice cream for reading, and tens of thousands of books were read by Connecticut youth due to A.C. Peterson's because ice cream was in the offing. The history of our organization and our personal lives is Bloomfield through and through. And we seek to preserve this beautiful piece of history through the oral and written tradition. However, true work on the ground concerning environmental sciences and policy is the true key to that preservation. And our partner organization is relentless in that goal. The largest issues are corrected on the local level. We are honored to partner with the Bloomfield Conservation, Energy, and Environment Committee, represented tonight by Carmela Garofolo, a stalwart for sustainability. Ms. Garofolo, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about the CEEC and the vital initiatives you've taken on. Would you please?
Thank you, Khalid. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Bloomfield Conservation, Energy, and Environment Committee and Chairperson Mary Ann Horn, I'm delighted to be collaborating with the Dalhouse Foundation and the Bloomfield Public Library on this program. Our committee, as its name indicates, has been committed to making our town and indeed our planet a better, greener place for us and future generations. We are involved in such energy projects as getting solar energy on public buildings, electric school buses, and energy tracking. Also recycling, composting, and waste management, tree canopy, and of course, education. We look forward to this evening to hearing from Shalanda Baker and the wisdom she has to offer us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Garofolo. This program really means a lot to me, and you couldn't have told me 2 or 3 months ago that energy would be so important to me. We overuse the word in pop culture a lot. Ms. Baker is the reason that I'm a lot more concerned about energy and how it's dispersed. I'd like to tell you a little bit about this young lady because her accolades need to be described. She's a professor at Northeastern School of Law, and before joining the faculty, she spent 3 years as an associate professor of law at the William S. Richardson School of Law, University of Hawaii, where she was the founding director of the Energy Justice Program. Prior to that, she served on the faculty at the University of San Francisco School of Law. In 2016, she won a Fulbright Award and spent a year in Mexico exploring energy reform, climate change, and indigenous rights. Her newest role is the Deputy Director of Energy Justice in the Office of Economic Impact and Diversity at the US Department of Energy. And I would like to point out the first ever Deputy Director of Energy Justice. That term did not exist 4 years ago. The book, Revolutionary Power, An Activist's Guide to the Energy Transition. Amazing read. In these slim pages, so much information is contained. Ms. Baker presents an inspiring call to action for a justice-centered transition away from fossil fuels and offers the practical tools needed to achieve it. Ms. Baker argues that transforming our energy system is the next domain to advance civil rights and to upend the energy sector's unequal power dynamics. We usually don't relate energy and civil rights. We usually don't connect the power that streamed into our homes and civil rights. And then the tsunami in Southeast Asia happens. And then Hurricane Katrina happens. And then Haiti happens. And most recently, and with a tragic level of irony, the power outages down in Texas due to unseasonable weather. Unseasonable does not do it justice. Ms. Baker published this book in January, and I mean, it is so right on time for Black History Month and for what is going on in our atmosphere right now. Throughout the book, Ms. Baker shares stories of those disadvantaged by the energy sector and shows how people are fighting to create a more just system. She had Hawaii and Mexico as case studies for how new energy implementation is enacted and the pitfalls of some programs that we may see as being equitable. At the center of the entire book is a call for equity, a call for justice, and a call for each one of us to kind of take up the reins of this issue. We flick a light easily and our room is illuminated, but again, we don't think about the power and how it gets here. I know I was thinking about it a few months ago when I got an Eversource bill, and a lot of people were, and the people spoke up about some Eversource increases, and simply due to the thrust and the power of the people, Eversource backed off. Seeing that in action for me is really inspiring. Black, brown, and indigenous peoples are affected by energy inequality far more than any other demographic. And the book really delves into the how and the why with a detailed plan that I believe anybody can understand. Ms. Baker, I'm sorry, I'm trying to talk about your book for you, but what really has played loudly in my mind, I remember I was watching Super Bowl, and just the carnage, if you will, in Texas really had me thinking of you. But I'd love for you to talk just a little bit about how this book first came to be in your sights, and just how it is using these terms that, again, energy equality, energy inequality, the grid. These things have never been inextricably linked before, and I think you did a good job of that with this book. What can you talk just kind of 30,000 feet high about the experience of writing this book and getting people to focus on this, which a little while ago was not an issue?
Wow, Khalid, you put a lot on the table there. And thank you so much for that introduction. Before I get started, because there's so much to talk about, I want to do a couple things. And
yes, please.
One is, I just want to acknowledge that I'm dialing in from so-called Boston, and this is land that is the traditional territory of the Nipmuc, Massachusetts, and Wampanoag people. And the Wampanoag people are the people of the first light. I always like to say that because I think my work is trying to bring light where before there was darkness. And so I'm hoping that my work is in some way in honor of their ongoing struggle for self-sovereignty. And so I want to acknowledge that. I also want to thank the Bloomfield Public Library. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me be a part of this series. It sounds like you all are really killing it. And thank you for opening the doors wide for me to be a part of this. Thank you, Meredith, for organizing this event, and the Dolls House Foundation for all the amazing work that you do to inspire young people and to support them on their educational journeys. I also want to thank someone who will be embarrassed by this, but I'm going to do it anyway, and that's Tara Span, who's there in the audience. She really sat by me, stood by me, tolerated me as I wrote this book, and really brought it to its conclusion this summer. And then I also just want to lift up and acknowledge my ancestors. So Khalid, I'm from Texas.
Yes.
And so I have some deep connections to and commitments to the communities that were so impacted by the unforeseen, but now becoming increasingly foreseeable weather emergency that unfolded a couple weeks ago. So you're right. For me, this work couldn't have been more timely. I mean, I can't explain the timing of it, but there was something sort of in my ear saying, you need to get this book done. And so I know you asked me a simple kind of high level question, but I do feel like I want to take a few minutes to sort of lay some foundation about the book and my journey to write it, as well as kind of the key takeaways that I hope to impart in the book. And thank you again for reading it. I know you read it. I could tell by what you were talking about. And I know it gets dense in a lot of places. So you hung in there. And I won't put Tara on the spot. I know she's still working on it, but
she was reading you.
But no, thank you so much. So, this story really began in 2008. I'm a lawyer by training and went to law school here in Boston at Northeastern University. I graduated in 2005, became a corporate lawyer, and spent a couple years here in Boston working as a project finance lawyer. So what that meant was that I helped large companies and developers to build large energy and infrastructure projects. And so I spent a couple years of my early career in law doing that. And then I had a phenomenal opportunity in the fall of 2008 to spend time as an associate at our law firm's Tokyo office. And so I got that call and I didn't hesitate. I said, yes, I will go to Tokyo. And so many of you on this call, I'm sure everyone will recall that 2008 was a time a lot like now. It was really uncertain. The economy was being upended. It was also the year that President Obama was elected. At that time, it was the hottest year on record, something that we've plowed through almost every year thereafter. And I was in Japan, where I was sort of helping to shore up this financial system, helping to support my clients who were a part of the problem and a part of sort of contributing to the disintegration of our financial system. At the same time, my mother was unemployed. My sister was underemployed. She had a law degree and couldn't find a job in her field. And you know, I just started to grapple with why I went to law school. You know, I didn't go to law school to be a corporate lawyer. I mean, obviously you do that to pay your bills, but I went to law school because I wanted to make a difference in the world. And so I spent a year in Tokyo really just grappling with what would be next in my career. And I then did something that was against most people's best advice. I ended up buying a one-way ticket to Mexico. And that may sound like it's out of left field. And it was absolutely out of left field from where I come from. I was a first generation college graduate, definitely first lawyer in my family. And everyone's just like, what are you doing? You know, why are you ruining your life? And I just knew in my heart that there was something else for me. And so I found myself in the year after leaving my law firm in a place called Oaxaca, Mexico. And so Oaxaca, I'm seeing a nod. David Mann is nodding vigorously. I can see you on my screen. Oaxaca is a wonderful place. It is the second poorest state in Mexico. It is home to no fewer than 14 different indigenous groups. And so those are indigenous groups that speak distinct languages. You can drive through the countryside in Oaxaca and meet folks who have very different traditions from other people, you know, the next valley over. And so I was in Oaxaca, living my best life. You know, many people would debate that, but living kind of in a very basic way, coming out of Tokyo, where I was, you know, living this fancy corporate life, and in Mexico, everything was stripped down. And I thought, okay, I think my next step is going to be to work with indigenous people who are fighting against coal, oil, and gas. And so that was in my mind's eye. And while I was in Oaxaca, I instead met indigenous peoples who were fighting against large-scale wind energy development. And so then this was 2009, this actually 2010. So this was a time when the idea of climate change was just sort of making its way into the popular discourse, and environmental advocates were fighting for more clean energy on the grid. There wasn't any talk about the injustice that might be wrapped up in our clean energy transition. And so I met indigenous peoples in a place called the Isthmus of Tehuantepec in Oaxaca. And the Isthmus of Tehuantepec is this narrow strip of land that separates the Gulf of Mexico from the Pacific Ocean. And that narrow strip of land makes it one of the, and that positionality, that geography makes it one of the windiest places in the world. And so when I was there in 2010, there were a handful of wind turbine and wind energy projects. And the people who were there knew that more was coming, and they were fighting because they were not getting any benefits. They were being displaced. People were murdered and threatened for protesting. And so what I realized in my encounter with the folks in the Isthmus was that if we are simply going to repeat our approaches to clean energy, or repeat the approach to dirty energy development in our clean energy transition, we're going to repeat the inequality that is wrapped up in it. So all of that development was happening without any free, prior informed consent, which is required by international law. And so the people there were protesting. And I will say that 10 years later, Oaxaca has the highest concentration of onshore wind of any place in the world, with over 22 mega wind farms, and the place has been almost destroyed. So in terms of ecology, I mean, it's a devastating story. And so I was meeting with people in Oaxaca, and it really just struck me that this might be my work. I had been a project finance lawyer building energy projects, and here I was in Oaxaca encountering people who were fighting against what we thought was the panacea, the salvation in terms of our climate mitigation strategy. And so I had a couple people here in the US who were like, what are you doing in Mexico, child? Bring yourself back. We know you have other dreams. We know you maybe want to teach. Why don't you come back? And so I came back to the US and got mentored and did a fellowship in Wisconsin, had my first teaching job at the University of San Francisco, and I was living my best life. I really was. It was 2012. I was happy. I was teaching. And I got a call out of the blue from a friend in Hawaii. And she said, Shalanda, there's a lot going on here in terms of energy. Any interest in joining me at the University of Hawaii? I was like, no, I no interest at all. Actually, I'm happy here in the Bay Area. And she said, just throw your hat in the ring for this position. So I threw my hat in the ring and I ended up getting a job. I fell in love with Hawaii. I got a job at William S. Richardson School of Law, and I landed in Hawaii just as that state was undergoing this transformation of its energy system. And so recall that most of my work, my research actually was on the Oaxaca story, on wind energy, clean energy development, and social justice issues, mainly in the global South. And when I got to Hawaii, what I saw playing out mirrored a lot of the things I had seen through my research in Mexico. And so that state had adopted a 100% renewable portfolio standard, which meant the state had the goal of meeting all of its energy needs using clean energy by the year 2045. The state was also going through what I know Connecticut and other states are now facing, sort of limits to rooftop solar development, and the utility there, like your Eversource, and I know you have a few utilities in did I hear a sigh? The utility in Hawaii was fighting against rooftop solar, and the regulators in the state were trying to design a community solar program that would actually reach the low-income folks and reach people who didn't own their own homes. And so I got to Hawaii when all of this was flying at me. And I had the opportunity and privilege as a law professor in the only law school in the state to talk to all sorts of stakeholders, regulators, lawyers, clean energy developers who were engaged in this transition. And at the end of every conversation, I had about 50 conversations in 3 months, lunches. People in Hawaii love lunches, love poo-poos, there are lots of snacks, lots of drinks. And at the end of every conversation, I would say, where does equity fit in? Where do the communities who have so much to gain from this transition, where are they in this conversation about how you're shaping the energy system of the future? And to a person, they would kind of look at me like, please don't talk about that. We are simply concerned with this transition. We want to do it fast. And if we start thinking about issues of equity now, it's going to slow us down. And so in every conversation, they would say, equity is not an issue. Equity is not something we should be concerned about. The energy transition is about technology. It's about switching the fuels from the dirty fuels to the clean fuels. It's not about issues of social justice or socioeconomics. And I knew that that was wrong based on my research in Mexico, but I also knew that it was wrong because of Hawaii. Hawaii is an expensive place to live. The cost of energy is extraordinary. When I was there, folks in Hawaii paid 34 cents per kilowatt hour for electricity. The national average was 10 cents at that time. They paid 3 times the national average for electricity, and they used less because the cost was so extraordinary. All of the dirty energy in the state was located in Native Hawaiian communities and Black and Brown communities. And these were communities that were burdened with, trash incinerators, with fossil fuel generation. I mean, it was was terrible. And these were environmental justice communities. That's what we would call them in the literature. I wouldn't call them sacrifice zones, which is another term I know you encountered in my book, Khalid, but I would say that these were communities that were overburdened by the environmental harms and hazards of Hawaii, and in particular in Oahu. And so because of that, because of this sort of invisibility of social justice issues in our energy transition, I started the Energy Justice Program at the University of Hawaii. And so I started that program as a troublemaker, which is what I do. I started that program to link communities to the policy conversation and to disrupt this notion that the energy transition had nothing to do with social justice. And I would argue that energy policy is always social policy. We're always choosing winners and losers in the way that we design energy policy. And so I started the program, we're off to the races, and I was still working on my Mexico work. I had the opportunity to do a Fulbright, as you said in my bio. I went back to Mexico in 2016, 17, and I got to do another deep dive in Mexico's energy landscape. While I was there, I was working on a book proposal. The book proposal was about Mexico. It was about Mexico's energy transition. And so I was there writing this proposal, working with community leaders, working with other academics. I was in this place called the Yucatan Peninsula. So many people may be familiar with the Yucatan Peninsula because it's where Cancun is, and it's a vacation hotspot. It's also sort of the crown jewel of Mexico. I mean, it's one of the safest places in Mexico, and it has the biological diversity that is really unrivaled. Yucatan Peninsula, though, is now the second site for Mexico's energy transition, where solar and wind projects are moving quickly at a rapid pace to be developed in Mayan territory without consultation and in an extraordinary way. I'll give you an example. One project is 1 million solar panels over thousands of acres of forest that will need to be cut down. And this is forest that the indigenous people there rely on to collect honey. And honey is sort of the lifeblood of this community. And so again, same sort of issues that we saw in Oaxaca playing out in the Yucatan. So I was writing this book proposal thinking, okay, I'm going back to the US, I'm gonna write a book about Mexico because I've been working on it for almost 10 years. I got to Boston. So while I was in the Yucatan, I got recruited to my alma mater, Northeastern. And so I was happy. I left the University of Hawaii with a lot of gratitude for my lessons there, the teachings, got to Boston, and was really ready to write this book. And I got a call from a funder of mine who said, "What are you working on right now? We know that you started your energy justice program at University of Hawaii. What's next for you?" Who gets that call, right? Like, I realized that was kind of a call out of nowhere. And so immediately I was just like, I have ideas. And so my idea that I actually had been thinking about was to scale the work that I had done in Hawaii to the national level, and to create an institute, a research center that was committed to supporting frontline communities. And so when I say frontline, I mean environmental justice communities, communities on the front lines of climate change. We wanted to support those communities on the technical aspects of energy policy, because we noticed that I noticed in my work, and I had two other people I was in conversation with from New York and California who noticed the same thing, that whenever communities were at the table, they didn't have the same technical expertise to play on a level playing field with utilities like Eversource or organizations like Sierra Club, et cetera. And so I wanted to scale up that work nationally. And the funder said, okay, we'll support you. And so I spent the first 3 years of my time at Northeastern starting a new organization, keeping in mind that I had this Mexico book and this other project. I'm getting to the answer, 20 minutes in. This other project, Revolutionary Power, was kicking around in my brain, that there was more urgency to start to talk about our domestic struggle around energy access. The more and more I was engaged with leaders around the country, the more and more I realized that there was a deep, deep injustice in terms of how we were engaged in our energy transition. And that if only communities had tools, if only advocates had tools at the ready in the form of a guide then they would be able to participate equitably in the transition. And so the colleague of the same funder and I were having dinner one night. So remember that original funder who said, "What are you doing?" Her colleague and I were just happened to be at dinner, and I started talking about this new project. And I was like, I'm thinking about a book. I don't know, like revolutionary power. I didn't have a title. I was just like, here's what I'm thinking. And she took it upon herself to reach out to a publisher, Island Press. And Island Press then contacted me and said, "We understand you have a book idea." So from there, I got on the phone with this publisher, this editor, and I pitched this project. And she said, "Great, we need a book proposal in a week." I went on a writing retreat in Jersey with a bunch of Black women. I banged out this book proposal. It all actually came through so clearly. I mean, writing retreats can be a little bit of a boondoggle, but you're just kind of hanging out. But I just dove in. I wrote this book proposal. I had it very clear in my mind, sketched out, and I turned it in, and they said, "We love it. We think this is going to be an important contribution." And this was 2 years ago. So that gives you a sense of just how fast all of this unfolded.
Wow.
We mapped out a timeline and I started writing, and I was bored. I was bored to death because I was writing this book through a technical lens. And I thought, if I am writing a guide for communities, I need to tell stories. And so I started with my own story. I started with Mexico. I started with Hawaii. I started with my father's story, because my father comes from Port Arthur, Texas,
That's right.
which is the epicenter and the spine of the modern fossil fuel industry. It is a place where Black and Latinx communities live below the poverty line, and their only way out is through the petrochemical industry or the fossil fuel industry. It's a place where my father grew up in the Carver Terrace housing projects up against the fence line of the Motiva, which was the Texaco oil refinery, one of the largest in the world. It's a place where his mother raised her kids and died too young of cancer. His brother died of cancer, and my father died early of heart disease. So these were the stories that came through. When I started to write, my father was with me, and he's saying, "Tell this story." I mean, I'm getting emotional because it flowed. And I just wrote and wrote. And then my mother came in, and she's still alive, and she raised me in Austin, Texas. She's still alive. That was a weird thing to say. She's alive and thriving. And so she came in, and there was a chapter in the book about growing up in Austin, Texas, being raised by a single mother who had a decent job as a white collar government clerk, and her salary wasn't enough for us to really, be wealthy in any particular way. She didn't qualify for public assistance, but she didn't have enough money to really keep our household afloat. So she was always, borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, as she would tell me, writing out her bills, figuring out which bill was first, et cetera, timing things. But I went to bed at night sometimes having bathed in water that was warmed by water that was boiled on the stovetop, right? Being covered in blankets because it was so cold. And, she had to keep the heat low. And these were not things that traumatized me. These were things that came flooding in as I started to think about how to tell the story of energy injustice in this country. And so the book covers a lot of ground. It's technical. It's a lot of storytelling. I honor and lift up my own family, my own story, my own journey. I honor and lift up the people I met in Mexico, in Hawaii. I honor and lift up their struggle. And I also talk about why, right, the system is structurally inadequate, and how people of color, well, I try to argue that people of color should be at the front of the line to receive the benefits of this new system. And the main point of the book is to argue that there is urgency here. There is such urgency. Black and brown people know that the climate emergency is real more than anyone. We're on the front lines. And so there's an urgency to fix this problem, but we have to be a part of the solution set, right? We need more clean energy in communities of color. We need more distributed clean energy. So that's solar, that's batteries. We need resilience in communities. Communities in Texas know that now more than anyone. We also need access to financing vehicles that allow people to participate in this clean energy transition. And we also need jobs, not only jobs, right? Jobs are great. We do need a pipeline for people to be involved in this clean energy transition, but we need solar companies that are participating in this transition to be owned by Black and brown people. Now that's something you don't hear a lot, right? You don't hear that often. It's about, oh, we'll have workers who are people of color in the industry. No, we actually need businesses that come from those communities, and we need ways to support them. And so the book is about all of that. It's about a lot of stories. And so I end the book really calling on folks to begin to think about how energy is implicated in their own lives and how energy injustice has touched their own lives. And then to organize. I know you're all in Connecticut. Well, most of you. I see a Massachusetts person, and I also see a person who I knew in Hawaii on this. I don't know how they found out about this event.
Wow.
But most of you are in Connecticut. And Connecticut, believe it or not, is going through its own energy transition and transformation. There are some regulatory proceedings going on that I would encourage you all to get involved in. They involved the rate that people are paying for electricity. And this is essential. Right now in this country, low-income people and people of color are paying upwards of 10, 15, 20%, sometimes up to 30% of their overall household income just to pay for utilities. Wealthier families are paying around 2 to 4%. That's an injustice. And that connects to structural inequality and structural racism. So the energy system is implicated in our reckoning with structural racism and injustice. And I would encourage you all to get involved and start somewhere. So Khalid, that was my long answer to your question of how I wrote the book.
I love it. I love
I
it.
hope it was helpful.
I love it. And one of the reasons why everybody right now, when they got their Twitter fingers on, is an expert. And then they open their mouths and dangerous information comes out. The people who have the expertise, many times they write these long tomes that make no connection to the people on the ground. What I found in your work is kind of an ability to break down some of these issues that are, let's face it, almost non-existent in people's minds, using a lot of nomenclature, a lot of big words, and words that we are used to using differently, but break it down to being understandable. In the investment-owned utilities, I got IOU in my mind, in that they're putting our souls and our country in debt. That really kind of resonated with me. As a scholar, as an academic, but also an activist, have you ever kind of had that struggle between kind of, so many of these works are written for other academics. My father used to say, somebody gonna study the study. This seems like it was written for every man, woman, and child in this country. Was that a hard kind of push and pull, or?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. Oh my gosh, I love that question. So first of all, only recently have I been called an activist. It's so funny. I never thought of myself as an activist. I mean, I lived in Mexico, where activists were people who put baklavas over their faces and were like in the streets ready to go. And I have sort of taken my role in all of that as, I'm going to write my way into this revolution, right? I'm going to be a part of it through what I write about and the stories I tell. And Khalid, you've hit the nail on the head in terms of where I fit in all of this. I mean, again, I don't want to get emotional, but I have spent 10 years being gaslit, where my work hasn't had sort of resonance. It's been like, Shalanda, this is really about technology. Shalanda, we really think you're doing activism. We think you're acting like a community organizer. We don't think you're being an academic. And I knew intuitively that connecting communities to this debate around energy policy was the work and was how we were going to engage in a just transition. And it was scholarship. And so there's so many ways in which my work has been marginalized for the last decade almost. And I would say over the last 2 years, 3 years, I mean, when I started getting big grants to do my work, I was like, I have arrived. But it wasn't until January when my book came out. And a week later, I was appointed into the Biden administration that I really thought, okay, I may have, I may be okay at this stage. But I spent a lot of time fighting with colleagues who didn't get me. I mean, they were talking to each other, more interested in sort of being in the ivory tower and communication with each other. And again, I had a book like that. I had a book about Mexico and, law and the technical aspects of Mexico's transition, but that's not the book that wanted to come out. And so I really did take a leap of faith. I mean, it's so funny because this summer I finished the manuscript and my colleagues at Northeastern were like, why don't you do a book talk? Why don't you do a book talk? And I was like, well, it's not really for you. It's more for people out there. And they're like, just give a talk. But I was sort of hiding this work because I had been so criticized about it not being true scholarship for so long that I think I've hidden who I am. And this book is raw, as you know. I mean, it's like, it's me all day long. It's my family out there on blast. It's me calling out that hypocrisy where, people in the big green movement. And so when I say big greens, I'm talking about the Sierra Clubs and Natural Resources Defense Council. I mean, these are well-funded organizations that I call out and I say, you have not been good stewards for people of color. And I was scared. I mean, I was scared and I was like, this is the work. You know what I mean? So yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, it wasn't easy to do this. And I stand on so many shoulders as I'm sticking my neck out. But now it seems like there are a lot more people with me doing the same thing.
Sure. I in my trade, I'm miles away from what you do, but I work with wine and spirits.
Oh.
And well, I'm a mezcal fan, and there's a few of my friends started something called the Agave Project, and they showed us what some of the farmers had to endure. And they're slaving away, cooking these big agaves in a cave for this beautiful fine spirit that's sold for $60 here. Mm-hmm. And they're getting cents on the quarter, if you will. When people talk about rum and they say, is it English? Is it Spanish? Is it French? When wine's about to come out of China and they're like, wow, it's going to be almost as good as old world wine. Just these terms that are baked in quite as it is with what you do.
Right.
That really, really struck me about kind of how the change in consciousness that this kind of book, it's not, the book is a one long call to action at every single step. Last one of my questions, because I keep running my mouth, the rest are going to come from our crowd here. I really wanted to know, as I was looking up some of the different organizations in your book, my thing is to look at the organization, go to the about page, go to the names there, see who's funding them. It took me not long to get to the Koch brothers.
Wow.
It did not take me long to find some of the people who, wrap small government and federalism, wrap their things in small government and federalism when it's really transferring money up to one place and not redistributing it back down.
Right.
What was really surprising was the fact that you talked about the environmental organizations. That's when I really, quite frankly, started listening on another level, because I know there's a cost to that. What I wondered is the reluctance to focus on the equity issues. Is it one of kind of a bipartisan political digestibility, or is it just purely finance? Or is it just kind of the same old thing of us not wanting to have uncomfortable conversations within ourselves? Where do you see that resistance coming from?
That's such a great question. And I think you're referring to the chapter I wrote on climate change fundamentalism.
That was going to be, yes, ma'am.
The term, for those of you in the audience, really refers to sort of a justice blind approach to climate change mitigation. So we need big wind on the grid, we need big solar on the grid, we need as much clean energy on the grid as possible. We don't care how it happens. We're not going to really worry about issues of equity. And I sort of, there's a term called carbon fundamentalism that had come out of the movement, and someone mentioned that. And then I thought climate change fundamentalism really is sort of this fundamentalist view on climate change mitigation. And I think there are a lot of reasons for that, Khalid. I mean, the rift between communities of color and the mainstream environmental movement is one that is deep, and it actually runs all the way back to the 1970s. And so we saw the birth of the environmental movement, I mean, really in the 60s with Rachel Carson and others, but the 1970s is really when it took hold, and we saw the birth of these large, well-funded environmental organizations, Sierra Club, Natural Resources Defense Council, Environmental Defense Fund, that were white-led organizations that were instrumental, actually, to defending the environment. And, you know, some of the same actors were involved in all of the legislation that came out of the 1970s, Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act. I mean, we had this suite of environmental legislation that was sort of transformative. It was passed on a bipartisan basis. I mean, it was a decade like none other, and it's affectionately called the golden decade of environmental law. And so all of those laws and all of those organizations were sort of springing up. And the idea was that our environment would become cleaner as a result of that. And we get into the 1980s, and we've got Black communities in North Carolina, right, and other places. Warren County, North Carolina, which is seen as the birthplace of the environmental justice movement. That place was the site of a proposed toxic waste facility. And the community realized none of the laws that you have passed are going to prevent the disproportionate burdens that we face. And so we saw the 1980s really become the moment where the environmental justice movement emerges, comprised mainly of Black activists and some people from the church. So, I mean, that's the interesting story. I mean, there's research done to really understand where toxic waste was sited around the country. So that was happening. And simultaneously, there was this movement of scholars who were emerging. Robert Bullard, who's the father of, I would say, I mean, I'm sure it's debatable, but such a seminal figure in the environmental justice movement. He's written tomes about the disproportionate siting of hazardous waste in Black communities and brown communities. And so the 1980s was really when Black and brown people realized the environmental movement doesn't have our back. It doesn't have our back. And these laws are not preventing the disproportionate burdens that we face. And so that legacy is sort of, there are echoes of that legacy today. I mean, there's still the environmental justice movement, which is thriving. There's now also the climate justice movement, which is on top of that and involving some of the same folks. And there's now an energy justice movement, which is very much about making sure that Black and brown communities are in the front of the line receiving clean energy benefits and benefits of this transition. But there's always been sort of a suspicion about, you know, the mainstream movement and whether or not the interests were aligned. I think we're coming around. I mean, there are hybrid organizations out there, 350.org. I mean, they take a justice-based approach to this climate change transition. Sierra Club is getting better. They have their first Latino CEO. And I think the youth movement, it's diverse. It's relentless. It understands issues of justice. And so they're making this an intersectional issue, and they're ensuring that justice is placed at the center. And cynically, I will also add that we've also got a lot of foundation dollars now running into justice-related topics. And so whereas before justice was seen as something to slow down the process, we're now seeing mainstream funders trying to fund justice work, but unfortunately the relationships are only with the biggies. And so smaller organizations remain underfunded, and the big organizations are now being funded to do justice work. And so there's nothing that gets under the skin of longtime activists more than an organization that hasn't been authentic and in integrity with that community, who is now getting money to do justice related work. So I think it's complex. There are a lot of dynamics, a lot of water under the bridge. And I mean, I think I end that chapter really saying, and we need to work together.
Right.
We still have to collaborate. At the end of the day, Natural Resources Defense Council has a cadre of lawyers who are on, doing the work. And so we need them to get woke, right? And then kind of, fight the fight where they are.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Because I personally think with a lot of issues, the last and the least of us, as they go, so we all will go eventually. As policy is administered to them, so will it happen to all of us. Look just at propaganda. That's all I have to say, and how information is meted out and how to find empirical data. Every single man, woman, and child now is at I would call disadvantage when it comes to that. I'm going to start asking some questions, and just to remind everyone, you can put some questions in the chat that you'd like me to ask. There will be some time later that we will call on folks, and you'll be able to talk directly to Ms. Baker. If your question does not get read or you do not get a chance, I'm asking you to engage with us on social media and online, which will put the information in the chat, and we will make sure that your question gets answered. We have finite time tonight, but our fight and our struggle is infinite. The first question is from Ms. Heather Lawson of Pedalshare. Her question is, why were the energy costs so high in Hawaii as compared to the rest of the US?
Right, so a lot of that relates to geography. So the fuel mix in Hawaii was mainly fossil fuels. I mean, that's why the state was so committed to a clean energy transition. And they realized that there's also a resilience issue, right? Any storm, any major cataclysmic weather event would effectively cut Hawaii off in terms of its energy supply. And so there's an extraordinary cost to bring fossil fuels to the islands and distribute it. And I think economies of scale, honestly, make the costs go up. So these are small places, not extraordinary in terms of the vast territory where you can buy tons of wires and poles at a lower cost. So, I think relative to other places, it's small. And we also have other types of electricity markets around the country where there's a wholesale market for energy that is bought on the open electricity market. And so I think that also contributes to the high cost of electricity and the high cost, frankly, high cost of electricity, but everything is expensive in Hawaii. And so one of the facts that I uncovered in doing research for the book was that, and I had heard a rumor that there were only 3 days worth of food on the islands at any given time. If that doesn't give you a chill, what does? I mean, it wasn't actually that bad, but it wasn't that much better. And so there's a serious resilience issue, and it's because of the tourism there where, you can't ship enough food. You can't keep people fed. And, agriculture is also, has been devastated in many ways. And so people aren't growing their own food. And there's a movement in Hawaii. I have hope for Hawaii. Hawaii taught me a lot, and people there are doing really great work.
That's awesome. You look at any product, there's the price, and it'll say price is higher in Hawaii and Alaska. When I was like 7 years old, I was like, I don't know if I want to go there. Everything seems expensive. But what you talk about with the economies of scale and the tourism and the resiliency of the people, it's sometimes a gift and a curse. Sometimes, again, the last and the least of us, they figure it out. People in housing projects in the lower 48, I lose power, we gonna run them wires from across the way. So we figure it out how to eke out day by day.
Right.
We figure out how to survive, but the opportunity to thrive has been taken. That's something else I really gleaned from the book. This is an amazing question from Ms. Christina Gerhardt. I hope I'm saying your last name correctly. Can you share a bit about the lessons you learned in Mexico and in Hawaii, and in writing your book inform your current position? That is, I'm curious to hear more about what we are thinking about carrying, what you're thinking about and what you're carrying forward. What are you bringing to, who are you bringing together? What types of changes are you looking at engaging and addressing? And Ms. Gerhardt says, the question is open-ended, but intentionally so. So take a bite out of that any way you wish.
Right, Khalid, repeat the first part one more time.
Sure. Can you share a bit about how the lessons you learned in Mexico and Hawaii and through writing the book inform your current work and position, and some of the things that you maybe are thinking to enact kind of directly with those experiences? Kind of what's the carryover?
Yeah. Hey, Tina. Good to see you. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for joining. So my gosh, I mean, the lessons are numerous. I can't talk a lot about the policy side of my work. I would love to come back to Bloomfield Public Library and talk about my new role, wearing a different hat. But I can talk about the lessons that I've learned along the way. And so it's so funny. I was just talking to Tara. She's so tired of me. Every day I'm like, oh my God, I'm living my best life. Oh my God, life is so great. Oh my God. Like literally everything I have learned has prepared me for today. And everything I'm learning today is preparing me for tomorrow. Like, I mean, it's such a quick synthesis now. I mean, every skill in terms of building teams, in terms of starting organizations, in terms of being able to talk to community leaders and academics and stakeholders who are advocates. I mean, I'll give you an example. Just this week, I spoke to funders at a funder meeting I was invited to on Monday. On Wednesday, I hosted a group of 10 academics, advocates, scientists from National Renewable Energy Lab, and regulators in a sort of hackathon, a policy hackathon, where I was like, here's an idea, let's hack at this. And it was an hour, it was fast, it was fun. I started an internship program. We'll make sure we get information out on the internship program. I set up an internship program for the Justice 40 initiative yesterday, which is my pipeline. I love students. And so students are going to be the lifeblood of my work. And, I can't do this alone. I need the next generation to be seated with the right knowledge. So that happened this week. And then today I led a panel of 4 civil rights, social justice, environmental justice leaders at the DOE, something that had never been done before. We had 400 people on a Black History Month conversation talking about the legacy of environmental injustice and climate injustice in this country. My mind is going to explode, right? Like, who gets to do that? And that's because I went to Mexico and I started talking to people about their struggle. It's because of Hawaii, where I learned how to talk to regulators. I learned how to, I had already talked to people in the corporate world because I had been a corporate lawyer. So it's just like every day I'm using different parts of me and different skill sets. I mean, it's exhausting and it's the most fun I've ever had. I mean, literally, it's the most fun. And I'm reminded constantly that I'm not alone, right? My dad is still here. And I'll have to say, one of the people on that panel was from Port Arthur, Texas. He's a Goldman Environmental Prize winner. So huge, prestigious environmental award that's only given to a handful of people every year. He got it in 2011 because of Port Arthur and because of his activism there. So I got to connect with him, and he shared something on the panel today, which was that his best friend died of cancer. Again, this is a community that is an environmental justice community. That is a sacrifice zone. So Port Arthur is absolutely a place where bodies are sacrificed so that we can have our lights on.
All right. All right.
I use all of these skills every day, and I know there are probably more questions, but anyway, I feel very blessed to do my work.
The way you give honor to those who have passed on, and just kind of the tradition of the respect for the elders and those who came before. After reading your book, when I grew up, something called the kahuna was a burger or some candy or something in a cartoon. I will never play with that term again. When you talked about starting the meeting, and the kahuna,
Mm.
which is like an elder,
Mhm.
you know, started singing and started chanting and pretty much gave you permission from the heavens to do your work. I mean, that
Ah,
really means a lot, and how you carry that through all of this means a lot, because there's always a separation of mysticism and state, if you will, or any type of stuff that comes from within, especially with work like this. To infuse the two gives a lot of meaning. And I think, you know, with a lot of folks, Black folks, a lot of us, we believe in our God. And I think that connection is seen throughout your book, which is another awesome point.
well,
I have a question from, I'm sorry, did I cut you off yet?
no, well, I just want to respond to that because, you know, my sister read the book, of course, and she had her notes after and critiques
All
and,
right,
you know,
okay, yeah,
corrections and
sibling.
overuse of this term. I'm like, really? I wrote a book. Can you help me out? Like, can I get a little latitude? But, you know, she said, what I really learned, what I really felt was this religious or spiritual aspect. I was like, really? I didn't even think about that. But, you know, Hawaii is, and I am a deeply spiritual person, but, I wasn't even sure how far to go with that in the book, but Hawaii is a place where spirituality and connection to the cosmos is everywhere. And the thing that you're referring to, again, I know that people haven't read it, but the thing that you're referring to is the opening of a community meeting to talk about community energy. And so I just want to describe that to the people here. So I had organized this meeting, well, co-organized this meeting on the island of Molokai, which is this amazing, incredible place in Hawaii. It's a small island. It's known as kind of the most Native Hawaiian island. 70% or so of the people there are Native Hawaiian. And the community was sort of struggling with trying to set up its own energy system and do some community energy planning. And so my students, I had taught a class on energy planning all semester. I love the administrators at Hawaii. They let me do a lot. And so we had this class, and my students had studied Molokai for 3 months. And so this was in June. After the semester, we go there for this 2-day meeting. And to open every major meeting in Hawaii, there's a blessing by the kahuna in the community, and they will give a prayer to open the meeting to make sure that it's blessed. And so we were all in this room at a sort of community center type place. It was really beautiful up on the mountain. And, you know, we were all sitting down, and this kahuna elder came in, and he's sort of the spiritual leader in this community. And he started stomping his feet and chanting and calling to the elements, which were ancestors and deeply connected to his lineage, and, you know, chanting. And as he called on the wind, the wind came in, the windows opened, the door opened, and there was wind. And I was like, is this really happening right now? And then he called on the rain, and the rain started coming through the windows. And I'm in this room. My students are on either side of me. Literally, all of us had what they call in Hawaii goose flesh, right? Or chicken skin. And so we're in there, and I have tears rolling down my face. And I look at my students, and we're like, that happened, right? Like, we will never forget this moment. That actually happened. And so I wanted to include that in the book, because in that chapter, I'm really talking about this cosmology and this connection that Native Hawaiians have to the elements as not something that should be commodified, but something that we should be in relationship to, and we should respect, and something that the community should all have access to. And so it's an unforgettable moment. And, you know, it happened. It did happen. I have witnesses. But sorry, go ahead, Khalid.
All good. Well, now we're gonna get a little exciting and a little informal, and everybody knows who's been with a Zoom with me. Usually when it's professional or personal, I'm walking around and won't sit down and making folks dizzy. So to that end, what I'm going to do is,
You look surprised.
we're going to call on some folks. I gotta be up to call on folks. I'm gonna call on some folks, everyone in the crowd. You're going to get a chance to ask Miss Baker some questions live and in the flesh. Now, if you know, like I know, her phone's gonna be off next year. Now, I mean, this woman's important. She's gonna have Secret Service before it's over. So get your questions in now, and she'll always know that she knew you when. So, anybody wants to ask a question, click on the drop-down menu and click raise hand, and I will be glad to call on you.
Oh, David Mann. Sorry, once a professor,
David.
Always a professor. I'll leave it to you, Khalid.
Yeah, David. David's trying. Okay, let me get to him here.
Thank you. Can you
There
hear
we go.
me?
Perfect.
Yes, I was
Thank you.
trying to write on the chat, but I wasn't sure it went in. First of all, I'd like to say thank you so much for this talk. You're a great speaker and you have a lot to say. I'm very excited. Here in the town of Bloomfield, the CEEC and the town are presently engaged in trying to come up with a policy to deal with larger utility scale solar energy producing. And that takes several forms, one of which is energy justice. The question I had for you is, from your experience, when you go into the boardrooms, what are the right asks that get you the answers that you want to hear, or get you somewhere?
Ooh,
Awesome.
David.
Awesome. The right
The
answer. I
heart
like
of
that.
things. Love it. So thank you for the question, and thank you for being involved in local clean energy policy and development. That's phenomenal. So I think some of the asks that you should be considering are there opportunities for community co-ownership of this project, right? Is there a way for us to co-own this with you? And so it's not an off-the-wall ask, and I think in this country it is more so, but that ask could lead to other types of economic benefits. So I'm assuming that this is a grid-connected project that will go to Eversource. You should be asking questions around how much this is going to reduce my energy bill. Is there a way to make this a community shared solar project where members of the community can subscribe to own panels, or sort of, I guess they would own the panels in sort of a share sense. So community shared solar allows people to sort of put their name on 2 or 3 solar panels or a handful, and then get a return on their electricity bill through that. So is this going to be a community solar project? Can we convert it into that? What would it take? I would also say, is there a community benefits agreement that we can begin to hammer out, where you make certain agreements to our local community? For example, are you going to hire certain people from various backgrounds? How are you getting your workforce? Where are you sourcing these supplies? And, are you going to contribute to a community center or a library that you might like? Anyone know anyone? Those sorts of things, right? So community benefits, but I would start with the jugular, which is ownership. I would move into community shared solar. I would move then into jobs and actual, training and other types of programs. And I think that will help to start the conversation. And the thing about energy justice is that your community knows better than anyone what you should be asking for. I have some ideas, but you all should be organizing and thinking about, just blue sky. This organization, this entity is coming into your community and will disrupt your environment and offer some benefits, absolutely. But there will also be costs that come with that development. How are they going to mitigate those costs? So you should really be getting clear with them. What's your environmental impact analysis? Have you done a study on, the impacts of this? But again, I like to think about our most vulnerable people in our community and how they might be able to benefit from this. So you should also be thinking about how communities in the surrounding area, low-income communities, communities of color, can participate in some way in the economic benefits and other job benefits, et cetera, that come out of that project. So it's a lot to think about, David, but I hope it was helpful.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And when you're preparing, I happen to be a member of the council, the deputy mayor, but when you're preparing these policies, you do it with good intent, but you're not sure where it goes from there, is then when you have to go actually sit down and knock it out. So I
Absolutely.
appreciate your thoughts, and we'll give more thought to those areas. Thank you.
Absolutely. Good luck to you.
Thanks.
All right. Next, we have Ms. Brenda with her hand raised.
Hey, can you hear me?
You're loud and clear, Brenda.
All right, thank you. My name is Brenda Watson. I work for Operation Fuel, and the good news is shared clean energy facilities and battery storage are those are projects that are coming to low and moderate income communities near us. So that's the good news. But my question to you is, Bloomfield is a very unique and beautiful place, but it's also a tale of two towns, in that
Yes.
30% of our residents have affordability issues. And I wanted to know if you are aware of any examples in other parts of the country that have utilized or harnessed the power of community land trusts to address blight and even push back on gentrification.
Wow, I love that question. So I want to start with the energy question and then move into the community land trust question. So what I heard in the first part of the question really had to do with accessibility, I think in terms of energy and cost. So right now there is an active live regulatory proceeding in Connecticut that is purely related to the rate structure, which is to say the cost of energy for low to moderate income folks. So I would investigate that. I don't have the docket number in my head, but if you are involved in any organizing efforts, I would have folks really mobilize, because regulators respond to comments, lots and lots of comments. They respond to organized comments. This is why I started my organization, because often communities are not organized and don't know, are intimidated by the type of language they should include in regulatory proceedings. So if you have access, even a local college or local folks that are involved in energy issues, I would recommend getting involved in that regulatory proceeding, because that will move the needle for those communities, putting money back into people's pockets. There are also, the utilities in Connecticut also have arrearage management programs, which means people who owe back payments on their electricity bills need to call their utilities and make arrangements with them to get lower overall payments over a period of time. And that will help to erase debt that is owed by those customers. So I did want to talk about the electricity question. And so with respect to the community land trust, this is so exciting. I love that question because it means it's creative. There are so many kind of cutting edge ideas that are out there right now where communities can sort of get some financing through grants or other things to buy community property that then can be used for, small scale farming and clean energy that can go into that local community. And so I actually don't have any examples that come to mind right away. Lots of people in the South are doing community land trust. So I would just encourage you to do a little bit of Googling around. Black farming is kind of reemerging as a thing that people are caring about. So I apologize for not having a specific name, but I think the South is where a lot of that activity is going on right now, in Louisiana in particular. And gentrification, I'm with you. That anytime you green a community, anytime you create more desirable things like clean energy, like a microgrid, like a community farm, that does make it more attractive to people with more resources. And so I would work with your local, your local government to sort of begin to think about ways to protect more vulnerable residents. But yeah, I'm sorry for not having immediate advice for you on that. But I love the question, and I think because you're asking the question, I feel like I'm confident that you'll find the right resources. So it's an excellent question, Brenda. So I think Khalid is is now on mute.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Growing up here, there's a town directly to our north that in one shallow mind carries a little more cachet, and I would say people sound like they're falling off a cliff if you ask them where they're from. The question is, where you're from, and they say Bloomfield, but I'm near the Simsbury line. There's kind of there for a while was a dividing line from both sides of town, and looking at the diversity in this room and seeing kind of where we're going, I think we're right to tackle issues. That's an awesome question. Awesome question. Paula Jones and Kevin.
Yep, unmuted. Go ahead. Hi.
Oh no, sorry, you're a little bit far away.
Hold on. Oh,
Now you're better. Thank you.
okay.
Perfect.
We should have plugged in the microphone. We have a problem with the speaker. So thank you for coming tonight. I guess I have two questions sort of related. One is your comment about, you know, how to take the advantages back to the community from like solar and so forth. I like the answer. I think really hinges on relocalization, and I think that's what you were really, you know, however you phrase that, bringing those, you know, not, you know, bringing the benefits back to the community. So I think the overall problem is relocalization versus extraction. And to the comments you were making earlier about the waste dumps and so forth, toxic dumps, the issue really isn't where they're located. The issue is not having them. I mean, the ultimate issue is we simply shouldn't have those things. So it's not, you know, I understand the issue with where they're permitted, and they're permitted in places where people are the least vulnerable. But the real issue is, how do we prevent them from existing at all? And the other piece I'd like to ask in sort of, you know, so relocalization, I think you would be strongly in support of. But in doing that and taking our utilities, because you're talking about energy here, back from the companies that really aren't utilities anymore. How would you relate that to sort of a degrowth philosophy? Because the other thing that's driving this is just the, you know, internal logic of infinite growth. And what do you propose to do? You know, how does your book address that?
I love the question, Kevin. I feel like I know what you've been reading. I know your priors, you're exposed, but you know, it's absolutely many of the root causes of our current dilemmas. We have multiple dilemmas, right? Trilemmas, quadlemmas. pick your term. Really, the root cause relates back to our economy and how we've decided to structure our economy. You know, again, you're referencing this sort of mandate imperative for unlimited growth and expansion and sort of profit, right? I mean, this is what drives our economy. It also drives how we think about the energy system, how we think about investments in energy infrastructure, how we consume as consumers, and the choices that we make. And so I love the going back to the root cause and causes. I mean, my book is it's not about economics per se, but I do touch on the underlying logics that you're talking about around extraction and around sacrifice. And so, I mean, I think lowering the toxic load is something we absolutely need to do. We need to lower our consumption as well. I mean, that's a part of this. So when we talk about the need to expand our energy infrastructure and bring more power on the grid, we have to sort of ask, well, why are we using so much power? Like, what is this about? You know, so I think you're absolutely right to kind of question root causes and question the underlying economic structure on top of which all of our energy system and infrastructure is laid. So great question. You know, I think a lot of the economists are dealing with that. I mean, we have the Democratic Socialist Party that is also sort of grappling with those questions. But yeah, we have to get to the root causes, and I completely agree with you. So I think I have one more hand up, But
Oh,
Khalid,
one
I don't
more
wanna
hand.
take away your moderator's privilege there.
Please, I need all the help I can get.
It's Toli's iPad.
Yes, totally.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. First off, thank you so much. This has been a fabulous talk. I've been taking notes and your story is very, very moving. So it's very empowering. So thank you for that. And I had a question. I was just curious if you have done any work with the Standing Rock crew and with the Lakota Law Project, because I think that they're a really powerful example of people taking back the power and maintaining it through great hardship and really bringing what the corporate powers were to a standstill. And I feel like those moments in our history are few and far between, and we need to raise them up a lot so that they will empower others. And along those lines, my last question is, because you're in DC, is are you feeling really good about Representative Deborah Haaland becoming our new Secretary of the Interior? Because I think that is a real game changer, and I'm really hoping that there won't be any problems with that. So those are my questions.
I love it. Well, so I think we're witnessing a historic moment in general. I don't think we're going back to the way it was pre-COVID. I think the public execution of George Floyd on May 25th really marked a new consciousness and a new birth. At least I felt that way in this country. I mean, I remember that day when my mom called me and she was so distressed, and I don't watch those videos. I still have not watched that one.
Yes, yes.
And she was speaking so fast and she was so upset by it and said, "That's murder, that's murder." And that was the moment when I think, and I think it was because of COVID that we were all forced to reckon with ourselves. If our world was moving so fast and had been, it had been business as usual, I think even George Floyd's unthinkable and unspeakable death would have just been another media moment, right? And then moved on. But we were forced to sit with ourselves and understand ourselves. And it was during a summer when we realized that Black and brown people were more vulnerable to this virus, and more vulnerable in part because they live in environmental justice communities and have an unequal healthcare system and health system that makes them more likely to have these comorbidities that make surviving COVID more harmful, right? We know that Black and brown people are 3 times more likely to be infected, twice as likely to die. I mean, this is injustice, and so many layers of injustice that were caused by this racial were made aware of because of this moment of racial reckoning, but also, I just don't think we're going back. I don't think we're going back. And so we have a president, and you all know that, right? You all know kind of what he's been up to. We have a 78-year-old white guy who has taken on the most ambitious racial justice platform of any president ever in history. And so I think that means that we're in a new day. The devil will be in the details, but I am so heartened by the appointments that I see. I'm heartened by my colleagues. I mean, I'm here with a gang of troublemakers. Like, I'm a troublemaker and I have not been rewarded for that until now. And so there are lots of people who have been causing trouble in good ways, throughout their careers, who are right with me, who believe in this moment. We have a climate platform where the president has committed 40% of all the benefits of climate investments to go to disadvantaged communities like Port Arthur, like Cancer Alley. I'm in charge of that portfolio at the Department of Energy. That means, that's extraordinary, right? I'm honored, and it's like, yes, I'm up for it. Like, I was born for this. And so we're not going back. We're not going back. I'm not letting us go back. So I'm committed to that. And I think with respect to Congresswoman Haaland's appointment, of course, I can't speak directly to it, but, things seem to be going well thus far. And her nomination is historic. The fact that a Native American would be in that role, that has been a position where so much harm has befallen Native people in this country who were left behind. They're more likely to not have energy access, right? the atrocity. I mean, you could just like stack on all the different horribles there. So in any case, I'm hopeful. I don't know your name, but I think it's Tully. And I don't think we're going back. I'll just end with that.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Good question. Okay.
All right.
Is it party
That
time?
was amazing. That was amazing. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for engaging and for really bringing your expertise, your acumen, but also so many parts of you to the book and here tonight. This really means a lot. And, you know, when we flick these lights off and on, when we plug things in, when we get mad when a fuse pops and we have to walk down to the basement and we're inconvenienced, hopefully we'll at least think for a second moment. Hopefully when there's, you know, and I'm going to give it over to our director, chairperson, and the reason I'm here, and someone who's given me a lot of purpose in life, Ms. Meredith Johnson.
Thank you, Khalid. Amazing moderation.
Yes, yes. Khalid is so passionate about this revolution, and thank you for your moderation this evening. Thank you so much. This was a wonderful evening. It really was. Clean water, flushing toilets, clean air. These are life's necessities that we take for granted. But when you read Revolutionary Power, you'll learn that energy connects us with everything, every aspect of life. And we know the people on this platform know that.
Sorry, Meredith, your audio is really tough to hear.
There you go.
There it is.
It's up there. Thank you. That can really send us over the edge. Miss Baker, our illustrious author, as she mentions, you have to read the book. You will go through a journey where she talks about a legacy of family members, and that energy and that passion, as she says, has helped her to drive her to do this life work. And we kind of feel like the ancestors are here right now.
All right, all right.
Encouraging that commitment of community ownership and renewable energy. We want to thank everyone tonight for joining us while we became educated. Just look across the platform. Look at the beautiful shades across the platform. Ms. Baker, we want to include your ancestors in our heart. And we hope you'll continue to include us in your solutions for renewable energy. In your book, you tell us revolutionary power is at the core about love. Just look at the platform. It's about a love that looks forward towards future generations, children unnamed, and possibilities unfurling. You will get that energy, that passion when you purchase this book. We are because of you.
Yes.
Dow's House, in its inception, we never even signed a specific name to our correspondence. We close with, we are because of you. And people ask, well, who is Dow's House? They're us, people who care about the earth, people who care about each other. That's so far reaching. It's so inclusive. It's so uniting. That's Dow's House. And we met Ms. Baker when she came to support a Dow's House event a couple of years ago. And we're so happy that the energy kept us connected. And our sister, of course, you know. But this is the energy. Dow's House just signifies you come to a warm house where people are welcome. They can eat, they can drink, laugh, and feel safe. As Khalid has shared, Dow's House annual theme this year is education. The world is our classroom, a lesson in our footsteps. Thank you, Bloomfield Library, for nurturing our community. Thank you, Conservation, Energy, and Environment Committee, for staying steadfast to the blooming hills and this cause. And Miss Baker, Miss lovely Miss Baker, thank you for the education tonight. We understand the lesson, and we're watching your footsteps nationally. Ms. Baker writes, it's a book for the kitchen table where friends gather. And so Khalid and my book is a little bit greasy, have a little bit of chicken grease on it, and because it's been on
That's
that
all right.
kitchen table,
That's
but
a good thing.
but we've shared thoughts, we've educated each other, and we just encourage this platform to go out and educate the community, because we cannot live without this energy.
Mhm.
Check us out, Dow's House Foundation. Khalid, could you give us the call letters? Because you know I never know.
I would love to. I'll give them, and they're in the chat. We are at www.dollshousefoundation.com, facebook.com/dollshousefoundation. Also, very importantly, paypal.com/dollshousefoundation. We are completely not corporate funded. We are independent. And we are because of you in all things. And lastly, Island, our author's book, I feel proud. I didn't go to the dark web for this when I actually bought it, and I felt good. If they're from the big boys, Simon and Schuster, I steal. But islandpress.com/revolutionary power. Support this book and also support Island Press. If you look, the books, it's a company that's independent, and they find authors that are self-propelled and are sending good messages. So please, please, please support them in word, in deed, and in wallet.
And we close with our virtues. No, before we close, we want to ask Ms. Baker, do you have any final words?
I have said so much, and I'm just grateful. I see two friends, David Cash, Tina Gerhardt, on this call hanging in, and really grateful that you joined us. So thank you all for being a part of this, and your attention and your passion, your questions. Ask more, ask more, ask more. Keep trying to figure this out. The energy system is intentionally meant to be complex and opaque, but it's not that hard. So please keep diving in, keep pushing, because it's your energy, it's your system. So it belongs to all of us. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much. And I see my sister Tara Span there. Tara Span said, look, my partner wrote a book. She sent me a text. I said, can we support the book? And this was way before Miss Baker became the illustrious national official that she is today. So in closing, we just want you to keep the thoughts of learn much, live well, and love endlessly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good night, everybody.
All right.
Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Bye.